I never thought the snow-covered expanse of Baffin Island could harbor secrets dark enough to haunt my dreams. As I stepped off the small charter plane, the chill of the Arctic air bit into my skin, sharp and biting, a stark reminder that I was far from the familiar comforts of home. The vast white landscape stretched before me, a seemingly endless sea of ice, whispering promises of adventure and danger alike. With each crunch of my boots on the frozen ground, I felt a rush of excitement mixed with trepidation. I was Lucas, a forest ranger and adventurer, and this was my chance to explore the untouched beauty of one of Canada's most remote national parks. But as I glanced around, I sensed something lurking beneath the surface, a tension in the air that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The trails were well marked, but I was drawn to the uncharted territories that lay beyond them. As I ventured away from the paths that had been traveled by countless others, the world around me transformed. The wind howled, carrying with it ghostly echoes that seemed to resonate from the very heart of the land. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my neck, shivering not just from the cold, but from an instinctual warning deep within my gut. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape, illuminating the jagged ice formations that jutted out like ancient teeth. I pulled out my map, tracing the routes I planned to take, each line a promise of discovery. But as I looked up, the vastness of the terrain before me felt overwhelming, as if the land itself were watching, waiting for me to make my move. Biabur spent months preparing for this expedition, gathering permits, studying the geography, and listening to tales from other explorers. They spoke of the beauty of the island, the wildlife, and the pristine wilderness, but some whispered about the strange occurrences reported by those who had wandered too far from safety. Their words echoed in my mind now, each warning a shadow that loomed over my resolve. Pushing the unease aside, I plunged into the snow, my heart racing with anticipation. The world around me was alive, the crunch of my footsteps the only sound breaking the eerie silence. As I moved deeper into the wilderness, I felt a strange exhilaration, mingled with fear, as if I were dancing on the edge of a precipice. The landscape shifted before me, revealing ancient stone formations half buried in snow. They stood like sentinels, their surfaces etched with markings that seemed to pulse with a history long forgotten. I approached them cautiously, my breath visible in the frigid air, each exhale a small cloud of uncertainty. I reached out, brushing my gloved fingers against the cold stone. The texture was rough and uneven, a stark contrast to the smooth, untouched snow surrounding it. A chill ran down my spine, not from the cold, but from a feeling I couldn't quite place, a whisper from the past, urging me to turn back. But curiosity clawed at me, and I couldn't resist the pull of the unknown. I stepped closer, peering into the crevices of the rock. The markings were unlike anything I had seen before, symbols that seemed to tell a story of a civilization long gone. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the area, howling like a banshee, and I stumbled backward, my heart racing. The noise was deafening, drowning out the sound of my own thoughts. I glanced around, half expecting to see someone or something emerging from the shadows. But the landscape was as still as death, the only movement the swirling snowflakes that danced in the air. I took a deep breath, willing myself to remain calm. "It's just the wind," I muttered, though doubt gnawed at my confidence. The wilderness was enchanting but unforgiving, and I had ventured into a realm where the rules of nature could turn treacherous in an instant. As I continued my exploration, I stumbled upon a narrow passageway between the rocks, partially obscured by a veil of snow. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the thrill of discovery surged through my veins. I stepped into the darkness, my flashlight cutting through the gloom, illuminating the walls that were adorned with more strange symbols, their meanings. Lost to time, the air grew colder as I pressed on, the silence thickening around me. I could feel the weight of history pressing down, an invisible force that seemed to whisper secrets meant to remain hidden. My heart raced as I moved deeper into the passage, the feeling of foreboding intensifying with each step. And then I saw it, a glint of something metallic glimmering in the darkness. I approached cautiously, my breath hitching, as I realized it was a relic, half buried in the snow. It looked like an ornate artifact, its surface etched with the same symbols that adorned the walls. My hands trembled as I reached out to touch it, the moment heavy with significance. But as my fingers brushed the cold metal, a jolt of energy surged through me, and I was suddenly overcome with a vision, flashes of a time long past, of people who had once thrived in this desolate land. Their faces were filled with fear, their eyes wide with desperation, as if they were trying to warn me of something unspeakable. I staggered back, gasping for breath. "What was that?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. The air felt electric, and I could sense that I had stumbled upon something far greater than I had anticipated. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, and I felt the ground tremble beneath my feet. Panic surged within me, and I turned to flee, the darkness closing in around me like a predator. I stumbled back through the passageway, the shadows stretching and twisting, almost as if they were alive, reaching out to claim me. The entrance loomed ahead, but as I burst into the open air, I was met with a sight that froze my blood. The landscape had changed. The snow was swirling in unnatural patterns, and the sky above had darkened ominously. A storm was brewing, and it felt as if the very land was reacting to my intrusion. I stumbled back, heart racing, and the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had unearthed something that was never meant to be disturbed, something that would not take kindly to my presence. The ancient civilization I had uncovered was not just a relic of the past. It was a warning, a reminder that some secrets are best left buried beneath the eternal snow. The wind howled as I turned to flee, the darkness of the cave behind me a reminder of the mysteries I had disturbed. I was not just a forest ranger anymore. I was a trespasser, a fool who had dared to unearth the secrets of the ice. And as I raced back toward the safety of the trails, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were closing in, waiting for the moment to reclaim what I had taken. As I stood on the icy precipice of Baffin Island, the stark beauty of the landscape enveloped me. The snow, white and pristine, contrasted sharply with the jagged rocks jutting out like ancient teeth. Yet, beneath this serene facade lay a world rich with contradictions, much like the people I had encountered along my journey. Take Sarah, for instance. She was my closest companion on this expedition, a fellow ranger who had spent years exploring the Canadian wilderness. She was fiercely passionate about conservation, her love for nature palpable in every word she spoke. But beneath that enthusiasm lay a hint of cynicism. She often questioned the motivations of those in charge, especially when it came to the government's handling of national parks. "They talk about preservation," she would say, her voice low and steady, "but it's only a matter of time before they sell off the land for profit." I admired her conviction, yet there was a darkness in her eyes that left me uneasy. It was as if her passion was fueled by a past disappointment, a betrayal that had colored her view of authority. I wondered what had happened to make her so wary, and whether that distrust would extend to me if I ever stood in the way of her ideals. Then there was Harold, our team leader, a seasoned ranger with an impressive resume and a demeanor that exuded confidence. He was the type of person who could charm anyone with a smile, yet there was an undercurrent of arrogance that sometimes surfaced. "You have to assert your authority," he'd say, a twinkle in his eye. "People respect strength." I found this belief troubling. In a place as wild and unpredictable as Baffin Island, strength was not just about authority, it was about humility and respect for the environment. I often caught Harold dismissing the concerns of newcomers, his laughter ringing hollow in the wind. Perhaps he felt the pressure to maintain control, to uphold the image of an unshakable leader. But I wondered if, deep down, he feared losing that control, especially in the face of nature's overwhelming power. As our team ventured deeper into the wilderness, the isolation began to weigh on us. The silence felt oppressive, broken only by the occasional gust of wind or the crunch of snow beneath our boots. I found myself reflecting on our motivations for being here. What drew us to this frozen expanse? Was it merely the thrill of adventure, or was it a deeper yearning to confront our own fears? My thoughts often drifted back to the ancient markings I had discovered. They were a stark reminder of the civilizations that had once thrived in this desolate land and the inevitable decline that followed. Perhaps we're all just echoes of those who came before us, I mused, glancing at Sarah and Harold as they plotted our route, chasing after something we can never fully grasp. Sarah caught my eye, her expression contemplative. "Maybe that's what drives us," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "The desire to uncover the unknown, to make sense of our existence in a world that often feels chaotic." Her words resonated with me, stirring something deep within. Perhaps my own motivations were not so different. I had come to explore, yes, but also to escape, to leave behind the burdens of everyday life and immerse myself in the wild. Yet, as the shadows of the past lingered, I realized that running away would not erase them. They would follow, lurking just beyond the surface. Our journey took an unexpected turn when we encountered a local Inuit elder, a man named Aupiluk, who had lived on Baffin Island for decades. His presence was commanding yet gentle, his eyes reflecting a wisdom that transcended generations. He spoke of the land with a reverence that struck me deeply, and as he shared stories of his ancestors, I felt a connection to a history I had never known. "The land remembers," Aupiluk said, his voice low and melodic. "It holds the stories of those who came before us, and it is our duty to listen." As he spoke, I caught a glimpse of the struggle that lay beneath his words. The Inuit people had faced countless challenges: colonization, environmental change, and the loss of traditional ways of life. Yet Aupiluk's spirit remained unbroken. He embodied the resilience of a culture that had learned to adapt, to survive, even when faced with overwhelming odds. His stories ignited something within me, a longing to understand the deeper connections between humanity and nature. What if our presence here is a disruption? I wondered aloud, my gaze drifting back to the landscape. What if our exploration is merely a symptom of a larger problem? Sarah nodded slowly, her brow furrowed in thought. "It's a delicate balance," she replied. "We're here to protect the land, but we also risk imposing our views on it. How do we find the line between exploration and exploitation?" Harold, who had been listening quietly, chimed in. "We're doing our best to preserve what's left," he said, but there was a hint of defensiveness in his tone. "We need to assert our presence to ensure that the land is protected." I felt a tension rising among us, a clash of ideals. That mirrored the internal struggles we each faced. My desire to explore clashed with the weight of responsibility I felt for the land, and I could see the same conflicts reflected in my companions. The tension reached a breaking point when we returned to the site of my earlier discovery. The markings on the stones seemed to pulse with energy, drawing me closer. I was compelled to dig deeper, to uncover the truths hidden beneath layers of snow and time. But as I began to brush away the ice, Sarah's voice broke through my reverie. "Lucas, wait, we shouldn't disturb this," she urged, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Why not?" "This could be significant," I shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. "We can't just ignore it." "But what if we're meant to leave it undisturbed?" she countered, her voice steady. "Some things are better left buried." Her words struck a chord within me. I felt the weight of the past pressing down, the specter of those who had come before us, whispering warnings that I could not yet understand. The markings were not just symbols, they were a testament to lives lived and lost, Stories that deserve to be honored, not exploited. Harold stepped between us, his voice a commanding presence. We need to assess the situation, gather data, and make informed decisions. This is our responsibility, to protect, document, and learn. But in that moment, I realized that our motivations were diverging. Harold's desire for control clashed with Sarah's intuition, and I was caught in the middle. I wanted to explore, yes, but at what cost? The air grew thick with unspoken tension, and I could feel the weight of history looming around us. I stepped back, my heart racing, realizing that the conflict had shifted from the land itself to the very essence of who we were as individuals, three people navigating their own contradictions against a backdrop of ancient mysteries. As I looked at my companions, I saw not just fellow adventurers, but representations of the internal struggles we all faced. Each of us was wrestling with our own ghosts, shaped by our pasts and the choices we had made. The journey ahead would not just be about the land, it would be about confronting ourselves and the truths we had buried beneath the surface, much like the markings etched into the stone. The tension between Sarah and Harold simmered beneath the surface, palpable and electric as we stood before the ancient markings. It was a moment fraught with choices, and I felt the weight of the decisions pressing down on me like the snow that surrounded us. Each breath I took was heavy with the realization that the path I chose could have far-reaching consequences, not just for me, but for the land and my companions. "Lucas, we need to be cautious," Sarah said, her voice low but firm. "Disturbing this place could have repercussions we can't foresee." I glanced at the markings, their intricate designs, beckoning me to uncover their secrets. But what if we uncover something important? Something that could change how we understand this land? My heart raced with the thrill of discovery, but deep down, I could sense the moral dilemma brewing. Was I willing to risk the sanctity of this site for my own curiosity? Harold stepped forward, his expression steely. "We're here to preserve history, not to make it worse. We need to document what we find without causing damage." His authoritative tone left little room for argument, and I could see a flicker of frustration in Sarah's eyes. "But at what cost?" she challenged, crossing her arms defiantly. "We're not just scientists. We're humans in a place that holds deep meaning. We should respect it." Caught between their conflicting ideals, I felt a surge of uncertainty. "Maybe we can find a way to explore without disturbing too much," I suggested, trying to mediate. But as I spoke, I realized that my own desire to uncover the truth was clouding my judgment. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the air, and I spun around to see a fissure opening in the ice nearby. The ground trembled beneath our feet, and panic surged through me. "We need to move!" I shouted, my instincts kicking in. We retreated a few steps, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the land was reacting to our presence, as if it were alive and aware. The ancient spirits of Baffin Island were warning us, and I felt an overwhelming urge to heed their call. As we regrouped, Harold's eyes hardened. "This is a sign that we need to be more careful. We can't risk losing everything." Over a few markings. But as we made our way back to the main trail, I couldn't help but feel a gnawing regret. My curiosity had been piqued, but the urgency of the situation forced me to abandon it. The tension between us grew, and I could feel the rift widening. Later, that night, as we huddled around a small fire in our camp, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken words. The flickering flames cast shadows on the walls of our tent, mirroring the internal conflicts that swirled among us. "Do you ever wonder if we're meant to uncover these secrets?" I asked, breaking the silence. "What if we're intruding on something that should remain hidden?" Harold chuckled darkly. "Intruding? We're explorers. It's our duty to learn about these places, to bring back knowledge. That's how we protect them." "But is it really protection if we exploit their history?" Sarah interjected, her eyes searching mine for agreement. "We can't just take what we want without understanding the implications." Her words hung in the air, and I felt the truth in them. My mind raced with the possibilities. What if our actions were indeed triggering something far beyond our comprehension? As the fire crackled, I felt the weight of the decision before me. I could either continue to push for exploration, driven by my own ambitions, or I could align myself with Sarah's perspective, respecting the land and its history. The moral dilemma gnawed at me, and I knew I had to choose wisely. The following day, we decided to investigate the fissure that had appeared, spurred by a mix of dread and curiosity. As we approached the crack in the ice, the sense of foreboding deepened. The ground felt unstable, and I could hear the distant rumble of shifting ice. "It's too dangerous," Sarah insisted, her voice strained. "We should turn back." But Harold was already edging closer. "We can't ignore it. This might give us valuable information about the geological history of the area." I felt torn. On one hand, Harold's desire to learn was commendable, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we were pushing our luck. "What if we document it from a safe distance?" I suggested, trying to find a compromise. Harold frowned, but nodded, and we set up our equipment to capture the fissure's details without venturing too close. As I peered through the lens, I caught a glimpse of something glimmering deep within the crack. My heart raced. Was it another artifact? Suddenly, the ground beneath us shifted again, and I stumbled back as an ice shelf broke away, sending a cascade of snow tumbling into the fissure. "Run!" I shouted, adrenaline pumping through my veins. We scrambled back, barely avoiding the collapse, but as we regrouped, I realized that something was wrong. The fissure had revealed a dark crevice, and from it emanated a low, mournful sound, like the cries of the earth itself. "What was that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," I replied, my voice trembling, "but I think we've awakened something." In that moment, it became clear that our exploration had consequences beyond our understanding. The land was trying to communicate, and we had ignored its messages. As we made our way back to camp, the atmosphere shifted. The shadows of uncertainty loomed larger as we grappled with the implications of our choices. I could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on me, and the moral dilemma I had faced earlier now felt more urgent than ever. That night, as we sat around the fire, I could sense the tension boiling over. "We need to discuss what just happened," I said, my voice steady. "We can't ignore the signs anymore." Harold's expression hardened. "We can't let fear dictate our actions. We're here to learn, and we can't turn back now." "But at what cost?" Sarah shot back, her frustration palpable. "We're playing with forces we don't understand." "Maybe we're meant to confront those forces," I interjected, feeling my resolve strengthen. "But we need to do it wisely, with respect for the land and its history." The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows on our faces as we stared each other down. I could feel the divide growing, the rift between our goals widening with each passing moment. The stakes were higher than I had initially realized, and the choices we faced were more complex than a simple exploration. It was then that I noticed a figure in the distance, a shadow moving among the trees. My heart raced as I squinted into the darkness. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What?" Sarah asked, her eyes darting to the trees. "There. Something's out there," I said, straining to catch a glimpse, but as quickly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into the night. My heart raced, a new wave of fear washing over me. Had our disturbance awakened something more than just the land? "Maybe we should leave," Sarah suggested, her voice trembling. "This doesn't feel right." But Harold shook his head, his determination unwavering. "We can't run away from what we've started. We need to see this through." As the night wore on, the weight of our choices hung heavily in the air, and I realized that the true conflict lay not only within the land but also within ourselves. Each decision we made would resonate far beyond our immediate circumstances, shaping the very fabric of our journey and the lives we touched along the way. As we delved deeper into the mysteries of Baffin Island, the weight of our choices became increasingly palpable. The air was thick with uncertainty, and the shadows cast by our decisions loomed larger. It was during this time that the subplots in our lives began to intertwine with the larger narrative, revealing deeper layers within each character and the conflicts we faced. In the quiet moments between our explorations, memories surfaced like echoes from the past. I often found myself recalling my childhood, particularly the stories my mother used to tell me about the northern lights. "They're the spirits dancing in the sky, Lucas," she would say, her eyes sparkling with wonder. "Always remember, there's magic in the world, but it can be dangerous if you're not careful." Her words resonated with me now more than ever. They served as a reminder that the allure of discovery also carried the weight of risk. I shared these memories with Sarah one evening as we sat around the fire, the flames casting flickering shadows on our faces. "My mother believed in spirits and magic," I confessed. "She taught me to respect the unknown." Sarah looked thoughtful, her own memories flickering to the surface. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about the creatures that lived in the woods too," she said, her voice soft. "She warned me not to venture too far from home, or I might attract their attention." "Did you ever believe her?" I asked, intrigued. "Not until now," she admitted, with a nervous laugh, her gaze flickering to the dark line of trees beyond our camp. "Maybe there's more truth in those tales than I realized." Our conversation deepened our bond, revealing the fears and hopes that shaped us. These memories were not just distractions. They were reflections of our current struggle, grounding us as we faced the unknown. Meanwhile, Harold's obsession with discovery began to reveal its own complexities. He often pushed us to explore further, his drive blinding him to the risks. Yet, beneath his bravado lay a vulnerability that was slowly coming to light. I noticed how he would often stare into the distance, lost in thought, as if grappling with his own past. One evening, as we prepared for the next day's journey, I confronted him. "Harold, what drives you to push so hard? What are you looking for out here?" His eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. But then he sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I lost someone out here years ago," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought if I kept pushing myself, I could find a way to redeem that loss." The revelation hung heavy in the air. "You think that discovering something monumental will make it right?" "I don't know," he replied, his voice cracking. "But I can't shake the feeling that if I uncover something significant, maybe then I'll feel whole again." His words struck a chord within me, illuminating his motivations and vulnerabilities. I realized that his relentless pursuit of knowledge was not just about discovery, it was a quest for healing. This understanding shifted my perspective on him, revealing the layers of complexity beneath his seemingly confident exterior. As we prepared for our next exploration, a sense of urgency began to grow. The weather forecast warned of an impending storm, and we had limited time to investigate the fissure before it buried everything beneath a thick blanket of snow. The pressure mounted, pushing us to make decisions with increasing haste. "Tomorrow, we need to make a final push to that fissure," Harold declared, his determination palpable. "We may not get another chance." "But what if the storm hits early?" Sarah countered, her concern evident. "We can't risk getting caught." "Out there, we won't be reckless," he assured her, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way he clenched his fists. The stakes were rising, and I could feel the weight of the looming storm hanging over us, like a dark cloud. That night, as the wind howled outside our tent, I found myself unable to sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with thoughts of the fissure and what lay within it. The memories of my mother's stories returned, intertwining with the fear that gripped my heart. "What if we're not meant to uncover the secrets of this land?" I whispered to myself. "What if some things are better left buried?" As dawn broke, the atmosphere shifted. The air was electric with tension, and I felt a deep sense of foreboding as we geared up for the day. The storm loomed, and time was running out. We set out, determination mixed with anxiety driving us forward. As we approached the fissure, the snow began to fall, thick and heavy. The world around us transformed into a white blur, the visibility diminishing rapidly. I could feel the urgency in Harold's voice as he urged us closer, but Sarah's hesitation was palpable. "We shouldn't be here," she warned, glancing nervously at the swirling snow. "This is dangerous." "Just a little closer," Harold insisted, his eyes fixed on the crevice. "We can document this." But before he could finish, the ground beneath us trembled violently. The fissure widened, and with it, a deep rumbling echoed through the air. "Get back!" I shouted, fear surging through me. As I pulled Sarah away from the edge, the storm intensified, snow swirling around, us like a living entity. I could barely see Harold as he stumbled back, the ice shifting dangerously beneath our feet. "We need to leave!" I yelled, panic rising in my chest. But as we turned to retreat, I noticed something glimmering within the depths of the fissure, a relic, half buried beneath the ice. It called to me, a siren song that tugged at my curiosity. "Lucas, don't!" Sarah cried, but the pull was irresistible. In that moment, I was torn between my desire for discovery and the instinct to protect my team. I felt the weight of every decision pressing down, the echoes of my mother's warnings ringing in my ears. I took a step toward the fissure, my heart racing. But just as I reached for the artifact, a sudden roar erupted from the depths of the crack, sending a shockwave through the snow. The ground shook violently, and I stumbled back, fear gripping my heart. "We have to go now," I shouted, adrenaline fueling my voice. The storm howled around us, and we raced back toward the main trail, the world becoming a blur of white. As we fled, I could feel the land reacting to our intrusion, an ancient force pushing back against our presence. As we reached the safety of the trail, the storm raged behind us, a reminder of the chaos we had unleashed. I turned to my companions, breathless and shaken. "We need to understand that some things are not meant to be disturbed." The revelations of that day hung in the air like a heavy fog. The choices we had made, the memories we had uncovered, all converged into a moment of clarity. We were not just explorers. We were part of a larger narrative, entwined with the land and its history. As the storm began to subside, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The subplots of our lives had woven themselves into the fabric of our journey, revealing the complexities within each character. We had faced our fears and vulnerabilities, and in doing so, we had forged a deeper connection with one another and the land we sought to understand. With the storm receding, I knew we had to return to our camp and reflect on what we had learned. The lessons of our pasts and the decisions we made in the present would shape the path ahead, guiding us as we navigated the mysteries of Baffin Island. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed. The air was still, but a palpable tension lingered, as if the land itself held its breath. I stood at the edge of the trees, staring into the vast white expanse of Baffin Island, feeling the weight of what had transpired. The snow glistened under the weak sunlight, but there was a starkness to it now, a reminder of the chaos we had unleashed. As we trudged back to our camp, the atmosphere was charged. The swirling snow had begun to settle, but deep inside I could sense a storm brewing among us, a conflict that had yet to erupt. Harold walked ahead, his jaw set, eyes fixed on the horizon, while Sarah lagged behind, glancing nervously at the fissure we had narrowly escaped. I felt the chasm between us widening, each of us grappling with our own fears and regrets. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the silence, reverberating off the icy cliffs. My heart raced as I turned to see a massive sheet of ice breaking away from the mountain, cascading down toward us. "Run!" I shouted, adrenaline surging as I grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her away from the impending danger. The ground trembled beneath our feet, the once stable surface becoming a chaotic swirl of snow and ice. Harold shouted something, but his voice was drowned out by the roar of the collapsing ice. I glanced back to see him struggling against the force of nature, his face twisted in a mix of fear and determination. In that moment, the world around us transformed into a living entity, the landscape reflecting the turmoil within. Shadows danced ominously as the sun dipped behind the clouds, casting an eerie gloom over the scene. The terrain felt hostile, as if it were reacting to our presence, punishing us for our intrusion. We sprinted toward the safety of the trees, but the ground continued to shake. I could feel the energy pulsing through the earth, an ancient force awakened by our disturbance. "Harold!" I yelled, desperation creeping into my voice as I watched him struggle against the onslaught of snow and ice. He turned to us, eyes wide with fear. "Get to safety, I'll—" But before he could finish, the ice shifted again, sending a wave of snow crashing down around him. "No," I screamed, my heart dropping into my stomach as I realized we couldn't reach him in time. The landscape was a blur of white chaos, and I felt the panic rising within me. In that moment of despair, something shifted. The ground beneath Harold gave way, and I saw him disappear into the depths of the fissure, swallowed whole by the earth. My heart raced as I skidded to a halt, the reality of the situation crashing down like the snow around us. "Harold," Sarah cried, her voice breaking. "We can't leave him." But as I looked back, I felt an overwhelming force pulling me away from the edge. The fissure seemed to pulse, the air heavy with an energy that was both frightening and mesmerizing. I was torn between the instinct to help Harold and the primal urge to flee from the chaos. "Lucas, we have to go," Sarah urged, grabbing my arm. Her grip was firm, but her eyes reflected the fear that mirrored my own. I hesitated, torn between loyalty and survival. "But what if he's still alive? We can't just abandon him." "Look at this place," she shouted, her voice rising above the roar of the wind. "It's not safe. We have to get out before it's too late." The ground trembled again, and the fissure widened, revealing dark depths that seemed to swallow the light. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a realization dawning that Harold's obsession had led us to this moment. The land was responding to our actions, and we had awakened something ancient and powerful. Suddenly, from the shadows of the fissure, a glimmer caught my eye, a metallic artifact, shimmering in the darkness. It was the same relic I had glimpsed earlier, but now it seemed to pulse with a life of its own, beckoning me closer. I could feel its allure, its promise of knowledge and discovery, but at what cost? "Lucas, leave it," Sarah shouted, her voice breaking through the fog of my thoughts. "We can't afford to lose anyone else." But the pull was intoxicating, and as I stepped closer, I felt a rush of emotions, fear, curiosity, and a sense of dread that wrapped around me like a shroud. The artifact glimmered brighter, its surface alive with ancient symbols that seemed to call to me. In that instant, I understood. This was the heart of the conflict. It wasn't just about the land or the discovery. It was about what we were willing to sacrifice for knowledge, for the truth. The stakes had never been higher, and the choices we made would resonate far beyond this moment. As I reached out toward the artifact, the ground shook violently, and I stumbled back. The fissure roared with a deep guttural sound, as if the very earth was warning me to turn away. I looked back at Sarah, her face a mix of terror and pleading. "Lucas, please," she cried, her voice breaking. "We have to go now." In that moment, clarity washed over me. I realized that the obsession with uncovering the past could lead to our destruction. Harold had chased knowledge to the point of recklessness, and now we were paying the price. The land was not a treasure to be plundered. It was a living entity, deserving of respect and reverence. With a final glance at the shimmering artifact, I turned away, the decision made. "You're right," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos around us. "We need to leave. Harold, he's gone, but we can't follow him into the darkness." The moment felt surreal, the landscape shifting and swirling as we fled toward safety. I could feel the weight of the decision settling in my chest. The loss of Harold, a haunting reminder of the dangers we faced. As we reached the tree line, the storm began to subside, leaving behind a haunting silence. I glanced back at the fissure, the shadows deepening within. The landscape felt like a character in its own right, a reflection of the turmoil we had unleashed, a reminder of the choices that had led us here. In that moment, I understood that our journey was not just about discovery, it was about understanding. The balance between curiosity and respect for the land. The turning point had shifted everything, and as we moved forward, I knew we would carry the weight of our choices with us, a lesson learned in the depths of Baffin Island. The air was thick with a heavy silence as we stumbled through the trees, the weight of our loss pressing down on us. Each crunch of snow beneath my boots felt like a reminder of what we had just witnessed, the collapse of our expedition and the fate of Harold, swallowed by the earth. My heart raced, each beat echoing. With the fear of what lay behind us, as we reached the clearing, I paused, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The chill of the air stung my lungs, but it was nothing compared to the cold grip of dread settling in my chest. I could feel the tremors of the earth beneath my feet, a lingering reminder of the chaos we had unleashed. My fingers trembled, the flashlight slipping from my grasp and clattering to the ground, dimming the area around us. "Lucas!" Sarah's voice cut through the haze, sharp and urgent. She grabbed my arm, her grip firm but her eyes wide with fear. "We need to keep moving." I nodded, but my mind was racing. Each step felt like an anchor dragging me down, the weight of Harold's absence suffocating. I fought to push the panic away, focusing instead on the necessity of survival. "Right. Let's get to the camp," I managed, though my voice sounded distant, as if it belonged to someone else. As we walked, the stark beauty of the landscape felt tainted. The snow glistened under the fading light, but instead of wonder, it evoked a sense of foreboding. I could feel the trees closing in around us, their dark silhouettes looming like sentinels, bearing witness to our failure. Did we really just lose him? Sarah's voice trembled, breaking the silence that hung heavily between us. I could see her struggle, the way she fought against the tears welling in her eyes. He was right there, and now he's gone. I know. I stammered, my throat tight. I should have done something. I should have, but the words caught in my throat, choked by the realization that we were powerless against the forces we had awakened. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, heavy and unyielding. I had been so consumed by the desire to uncover the truth that I hadn't fully grasped the dangers lurking beneath the surface. As we neared the camp, I noticed a change in the atmosphere. The wind had picked up, howling through the trees, carrying with it the whispers of the land. It felt as if nature itself was mourning, echoing our grief. I wanted to scream against the injustice, to rage against the loss of Harold, but all that escaped my lips was a choked sob. Once we reached the campsite, I dropped to my knees in the snow, the cold seeping through my gear. I buried my face in my hands, overwhelmed by the enormity of what had happened. "We shouldn't have come here," I whispered, the words barely audible. "Lucas." Sarah's voice was urgent, almost frantic. "We can't give up. We have to figure out what to do next." Her determination was a lifeline, but I felt adrift. "What is there to figure out? We lost him." "He's gone," I replied, my voice laced with despair. "We owe it to him to keep going," she insisted, kneeling beside me. "He wouldn't want us to just give up." Her words struck a chord, igniting a flicker of resolve within me. I took a deep breath, the icy air stinging my lungs, and nodded slowly. "You're right," I said, forcing the words out. "We can't let his memory fade here." As we began to gather our gear, I felt a shift within myself. The urgency of the situation propelled me forward, pushing aside the weight of grief. For the moment, I packed our supplies with trembling hands, each item a reminder of the life we had left behind. I glanced up at Sarah, her expression resolute, and felt a surge of gratitude. We were still together, and that mattered. "Let's check the maps," I suggested, my voice steadier now. We need a plan. We can't stay here. Good idea, Sarah replied, her focus shifting. Together we spread the maps across the snow, the lines and markings stark against the white backdrop. The landscape felt different now, hostile, threatening. As we plotted our next course, the reality of our situation settled in. We needed to find a way out, to escape the grip of Baffin Island before it claimed us too. I could feel the tension building, the lingering shadows of loss mingling with the urgency of survival. Suddenly, a noise interrupted our concentration, a low rumble echoing from the direction of the fissure. My heart raced as I exchanged a glance with Sarah, the fear mirrored in her eyes. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "I don't know," I replied, my pulse quickening. "But we need to move, now." We gathered our things quickly, adrenaline surging as we prepared to leave the campsite behind. Every rustle of snow or creak of ice sent shivers down my spine, the landscape feeling alive with danger. The shadows of the trees loomed larger, closing in around us, and I felt the weight of every choice we had made pressing down heavily. As we began to trek away from the camp, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was as if the very land was aware of our presence, judging us for what we had disturbed. I glanced back at the campsite, the fading light casting long shadows, and felt a pang of sorrow. It was a place of memories, now tainted by loss. "Lucas, stay close," Sarah urged, her voice firm. I could see the determination in her eyes, but beneath it lay the same fear that gnawed at me. We were both grappling with the consequences of our choices, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The wind howled around us, whipping through the trees like a banshee, and I could feel the chill creeping into my bones. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of grief and guilt anchoring me to the ground. I wanted to run, to escape the memories that clung to me like shadows, but I knew I had to keep moving for both our sakes. As we navigated the treacherous terrain, I caught sight of something glimmering in the distance, an object half buried in the snow. My heart raced as I approached, curiosity battling against the urge to flee. As I dug through the snow, my breath caught in my throat. It was another artifact, similar to the one I'd seen in the fissure, its surface etched with ancient symbols. "Lucas, don't!" Sarah shouted, rushing to my side. "We can't keep doing this." But I was already entranced, the artifact calling to me, promising knowledge and answers. "What if this is connected to Harold?" I murmured, my fingers brushing against the cold surface. "What if it can help us understand what happened? Or it could lead us deeper into danger," she countered, her eyes wide with concern. "We need to focus on getting out of here, not digging up more trouble." Her words snapped me back to reality, and I realized how close I had come to losing myself in the allure of discovery once again. I pulled my hand back, a wave of shame washing over me. "You're right," I admitted, my voice shaky. "We need to leave this behind." Together we turned away from the artifact, the weight of our choices settling heavily on our shoulders. The landscape felt unforgiving, the shadows growing longer as the sun dipped lower in the sky. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I knew that we had to face it together, carrying the memory of Harold with us, not as a burden, but as a reminder of the respect we owed to the land. As we continued our trek, I felt a newfound determination rising within me. We would honor Harold's memory by being better stewards of this land, understanding that discovery came with responsibility. Each step forward was a step toward healing, and as we navigated the unforgiving terrain, I felt the weight of our loss transforming into a commitment to protect what remained. The biting cold of the Baffin Island air cut through my layers of clothing, but it was nothing compared to the chill that gripped my heart. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the snow, I felt the weight of our recent loss settling heavily upon us. Harold's absence was a void that refused to be filled, and the stark reality of our situation loomed larger with each passing moment. We continued our trek, the landscape shifting from familiar terrain to an ever-changing labyrinth of ice and snow. The wind howled around us, carrying with it the whispers of the land, a reminder that we were intruders here, and the consequences of our actions rippled through the environment. With every step, I could feel the echoes of our decisions reverberating in the air. "Watch your footing," Sarah called out, her voice cutting through the wind. I glanced down just in time to see the ground beneath me shift, revealing a hidden crevice. I steadied myself, adrenaline surging as I realized how easily I could have fallen into the depths below. The experience jolted me back to reality, forcing me to confront the dangers that lay ahead. As we navigated the treacherous terrain, I found my mind drifting back to the lessons I had learned since our arrival. I had always viewed courage as a bold, fearless act, but now I began to understand it differently. Courage was not about the absence of fear, it was about facing it head-on, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Each obstacle we encountered was a test, pushing me beyond my limits, forcing me to evolve. "Keep moving," I urged Sarah, my voice steadier than I felt. "We need to reach that ridge before dark." The determination in my tone surprised even me, a flicker of newfound resolve igniting within. I could no longer afford to dwell on our loss. I had to focus on survival and the path forward. As we climbed higher, the terrain became increasingly difficult. The wind whipped around us, and the snow began to fall again, heavy and relentless. Visibility dropped, and I felt the familiar pang of panic welling up inside me. But instead of succumbing to fear, I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the moment. I focused on each step, each breath, reminding myself that I was still here, still capable. "Lucas, there's something up ahead," Sarah's voice broke through my thoughts, drawing my attention to a dark shape looming in the distance. My heart raced as we approached, the outline becoming clearer. It was a cave, its entrance partially concealed by snow and ice. "We should check it out," I suggested, despite the knot of apprehension tightening in my gut. There was a sense of danger, but there was also an opportunity. This could be a place of refuge or knowledge. "No way," Sarah replied, shaking her head. "We can't risk it. We need to keep moving." I hesitated, torn between the allure of discovery and the necessity of caution. But then I remembered Harold's fate, a stark reminder of the perils of recklessness. "Let's just take a quick look," I said, my voice firmer this time. "We can't ignore every possible lead." With trepidation, we edged closer to the cave. As we stepped inside, the darkness enveloped us, the temperature dropping drastically. I felt the weight of the unknown pressing in, but the flickering light of our lantern illuminated the walls, revealing ancient carvings and markings that sent a shiver down my spine. "This is incredible," I whispered, awe mingling with fear. The symbols spoke of a history that was both beautiful and haunting, a connection to the land that transcended time. I could feel the energy in the air, a pulse that resonated with my own heartbeat. As we explored deeper, the cave opened up into a larger chamber, the walls adorned with more intricate designs. I reached out to touch the cool stone, a sense of reverence washing over me. In that moment, I realized that this was not just a cave. It was a sacred space, a testament to the history of the land and its people. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the cave, jolting me from my reverie. "We need to go," Sarah exclaimed, her voice filled with urgency. The ground shook beneath our feet, and I felt a wave of panic surge through me. Instinctively, I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the entrance. "Run!" I shouted, adrenaline propelling us forward. The darkness closed in around us as we raced back through the narrow passages, the cave seeming to come alive with danger. Just as we burst out into the open air, the cave let out a thunderous roar, the entrance collapsing behind us. We stumbled to the ground, breathless and shaken. I felt the weight of what had just happened settle over me, a reminder that discovery could easily lead to destruction. As we caught our breath, I glanced at Sarah, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and exhilaration. "That was too close," she said, her voice shaky. I nodded, my heart still racing. But beneath the fear, I felt something else, a sense of accomplishment. We had confronted the unknown and emerged stronger for it. The experience had pushed me beyond my limits, forcing me to confront not only the dangers of the land, but also the fears that had held me back. "Let's keep moving," I said, my voice steadier now. "We can't let this stop us." From that moment on, I felt a shift within myself. Each challenge we faced became an opportunity for growth, a chance to redefine my understanding of courage and resilience. I began to take the lead, guiding us through the icy wilderness with newfound confidence. As we continued our journey, the landscape transformed, each turn revealing breathtaking vistas that filled me with wonder. I felt more attuned to the world. Around me, a sense of connection blossoming within. The land was no longer just a backdrop to our journey. It was a character in its own right, a living entity that demanded respect and understanding. We encountered new obstacles, treacherous ice formations, blinding snowstorms, and steep cliffs. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I embraced each challenge as a chance to evolve. I could see the change in Sarah as well. She became more resolute, her determination shining through her fear. Together we forged ahead, our bond strengthening with each step. With every passing day, I felt the remnants of my old self fading away. The insecurities that had once held me captive were replaced by a sense of purpose. I learned to trust my instincts, to listen to the whispers of the land, and to honor the lessons it offered. One evening, as we set up camp beneath a dazzling display of the northern lights, I reflected on how far we had come. The vibrant colors danced across the sky, illuminating the darkness, and in that moment, I understood the depth of our journey. We had faced not only the physical challenges of the land, but also the emotional battles that had defined us. I finally get it, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's about moving forward despite it. Sarah turned to me, a smile breaking through the remnants of worry on her face. Exactly. We've come so far together, and we can't stop now. As the lights flickered above us, I felt a surge of hope and resolve. We had faced loss, danger, and uncertainty, but we had also discovered strength, resilience, and a profound connection to each other and the land. The journey ahead would still be fraught with challenges, but I knew that we were no longer just survivors. We were explorers, guardians of the stories this land held, and witnesses to the power of courage in the face of adversity. The air crackled with tension as we approached the final leg of our journey. Each step felt heavier, burdened by the weight of what lay ahead. The landscape of Baffin Island had transformed around us, a harsh reminder of the challenges we'd faced and the losses we'd endured. As we climbed toward the summit, the wind howled, echoing the turmoil within me. "Lucas, look!" Sarah pointed ahead. I followed her gaze to a massive ice formation jutting out from the mountain. It was a jagged structure, towering over us like a sentinel, its surface reflecting the light in a way that made it appear almost alive. That has to be the source of the disturbances we felt. I nodded, a mix of fear and determination surging through me. We need to investigate. It might hold the answers we're looking for. As we approached the formation, the air grew colder, and a sense of foreboding washed over me. The shadows seemed to deepen, swirling around us as if the land was warning us to turn back. But there was no turning back now. We had already lost so much. This was our chance to uncover the truth. Stepping closer, I could see the intricate patterns carved into the ice, symbols that looked eerily similar to those we had encountered in the cave. These markings, they're connected, I murmured, tracing a finger along the surface. It's like a map or a story. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the air, and the ground shook beneath us. "Get back!" Sarah shouted, pulling me away just as a chunk of ice broke loose and tumbled down the slope. The formation was unstable, and we had to act quickly. "We need to find a way inside," I urged, scanning the area for an entrance. There has to be something here that can explain what we've experienced. As we circled the formation, the tension mounted. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, and I could feel the weight of our journey pressing down on us. Every moment felt like a countdown, building towards something explosive. Then I saw it, a narrow opening at the base, partially concealed by a curtain of icicles. My heart raced as I turned to Sarah. "This is it. We have to go in." She hesitated, anxiety flickering in her eyes. What if it's dangerous? What if we're not meant to disturb whatever is in there? I understood her fear, but I also felt a deep-seated need to confront whatever awaited us. We can't walk away now. We owe it to Harold and to ourselves to find out the truth. With a determined nod, we squeezed through the opening, the air growing frigid as we entered the icy cavern. The walls sparkled like diamonds, but the beauty was overshadowed by an oppressive silence. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me, the echoes of those who had come before us whispering through the cold. As we ventured deeper into the cavern, the markings became more intricate, and I realized they were telling a story, a tale of the land and its protectors. My breath caught in my throat as I pieced together the narrative, a warning of the dangers of greed and the consequences of disrupting the balance of nature. Suddenly, the ground trembled again, more violently this time. I stumbled, grabbing onto a nearby stalagmite for support. "What's happening?" Sarah shouted, panic rising in her voice. "It's the ice," I replied, my heart racing. "The disturbance we felt, it's not just the land reacting, it's something else." In that moment, the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. The true enemy. It's not just the environment, it's us. My voice trembled as I spoke, the gravity of my words sinking in. We've been driven by our desire for discovery, but we've also been reckless. We've disturbed something ancient, and it's angry. A deafening roar erupted from deeper within the cavern, shaking the very foundations of the ice. "We need to get out," I yelled, fear surging through my veins. But as we turned to flee, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, ethereal being made entirely of ice, its form shifting and swirling like a blizzard. It was beautiful and terrifying, a guardian of the land, embodying the very essence of the elements we had sought to conquer. "Who dares disturb the balance?" the figure intoned, its voice resonating through the cavern like thunder. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. "We didn't mean to. We were searching for answers," I shouted, desperation lacing my words. The guardian's icy gaze bore into me, and I could feel the weight of my guilt pressing down. "Answers come at a cost," it replied, the air around us growing colder. "You have awakened forces that should remain undisturbed." Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "We understand now. We've been foolish, driven by our own desires, but we want to make things right." The Guardian's expression didn't change, but I could sense a shift in the air. "To mend what has been broken, you must face the consequences of your actions. Only then can balance be restored." With that, the ground shook violently, and I felt the rush of wind as the Guardian unleashed a powerful blast of energy. I stumbled back, grasping for stability, but the force was overwhelming. The cavern began to collapse around us, ice and stone cracking, threatening to bury us alive. "Lucas, we have to move," Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. We turned and sprinted toward the entrance, the ground trembling beneath us. As we fled, I felt a wave of realization wash over me. I had been so focused on the pursuit of knowledge that I had lost sight of the responsibility that came with it. This was not just about uncovering secrets. It was about respecting the land and its history. Just as we reached the opening, a massive chunk of ice fell behind us, sealing off the cavern. We stumbled outside into the biting cold, breathless and shaken. The world around us felt different, as if the land itself had shifted in response to our actions. "We did it," I gasped, glancing at Sarah, who was panting beside me. "But at what cost?" She looked back at the formation, a mix of awe and fear in her eyes. "We've awakened something we can't fully understand. We need to be careful." As we stood there, the weight of our journey settled in. We had faced the unknown, confronted our fears, and come to terms with the consequences of our actions. The Guardian's words echoed in my mind, a reminder that the true battle was not just against the elements, but within ourselves. In that moment, a new resolve blossomed within me. We had to honor Harold's memory by becoming better stewards of this land, protecting its secrets rather than exploiting them. As I gazed out over the vast expanse of Baffin Island, I felt a sense of purpose take root, a commitment to learn from our mistakes and to carry the lessons of the past into the future. The air was thick with tension as I stood at the threshold of the ice formation, Sarah by my side. The Guardian loomed before us, an embodiment of the fury of the land we had recklessly disturbed. Each breath felt heavy, filled with the weight of our actions and the realization that we were now facing the true consequences. Only then can balance be restored, the Guardian had said, its icy voice echoing through the cavern like a death knell. I could feel the energy swirling around us, a tempest of ancient power ready to unleash its wrath. The ground shook violently, and I staggered, barely keeping my footing. "We need to face it," I said, my voice a mix of fear and determination. "We can't run away again." As if responding to my resolve, the ice began to crack, fissures spreading across the ground. I felt the pulse of the land beneath my feet, a heartbeat, alive and angry. "Lucas!" Sarah shouted, panic in her eyes. "We can't stay here." But I couldn't move. I had to confront this. "We must show we understand," I insisted, stepping forward. "We've caused harm, but we can learn. We can change." The Guardian's form shifted, swirling like a blizzard. "Words mean little without action," it said, the air around us growing colder. "You must prove your intent." In that moment, I felt a surge of courage. I reached deep within myself, drawing on the lessons of our journey, the understanding of our place within this land, the respect it demanded. "I accept the consequences," I declared, my voice ringing out above the howling wind, "but I won't back down from this fight." The Guardian narrowed its gaze, and I could see the eye flicker of recognition. "Very well," it said, its voice resonating like the crack of ice. "Face the storm you have created." With that, the cavern erupted into chaos. A whirlwind of snow and ice swirled around us, a tempest born of the land's fury. I felt the force of it pushing against me, threatening to swallow me whole. "Stay close!" I shouted to Sarah, who was struggling against the wind. The storm intensified, and I was thrown to the ground, the cold biting into my skin. I could barely see through the blizzard, but I knew I had to get up. I crawled forward, driven by a primal instinct to survive. "We have to fight back," I yelled, my voice barely audible over the roar of the wind. In my heart, I felt the weight of our journey, the loss, the mistakes, the knowledge we had gained. I summoned every ounce of strength and focused on the energy around me, feeling its rhythm, its pulse. "We can't let it consume us," I shouted, channeling my determination into the storm. As I rose to my feet, I felt a surge of energy coursing through me, a connection to the land that had eluded me before. The storm responded, shifting as if it were alive. I reached out, feeling the power of the Guardian swirling around me. "We are part of this," I screamed into the tempest. "We are not your enemies." The winds howled, but I stood my ground, my heart racing. I could see Sarah beside me, her eyes fierce with determination. Together, we faced the storm, a united front against the chaos we had unleashed. Suddenly, the storm began to dissipate, the winds calming as the Guardian's form emerged from the swirling ice. "You have shown courage," it intoned, its voice echoing through the cavern. "But courage alone is not enough. You must also act with wisdom." With a wave of its hand, the ice around us began to reshape, the fissures sealing up as the ground steadied beneath our feet. The Guardian's presence felt less threatening now, its fury replaced by a watchful calm. "What you seek is not merely knowledge, but understanding," it said, its voice softer. In that moment, I realized the truth. The battle we faced was not just against the elements, but against our own hubris. The storm had forced us to confront our actions, and now we had the chance to rewrite our fate. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. "We will honor this land and its history. We will protect it." The guardian nodded, its icy form shimmering in the fading light. "Remember, the balance must be maintained. Your journey is just beginning." As the last remnants of the storm faded, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We had faced the chaos and emerged stronger, transformed by the experience. I glanced at Sarah, who met my gaze with a newfound understanding. "We did it," she whispered, a smile breaking through the tension. "We faced the storm, but as we turned to leave, I felt a sudden chill, a whisper of uncertainty in the air. "What if it returns?" I murmured, my thoughts racing. "Then we face it again," Sarah replied, her voice resolute. "Together." In that moment, I realized we had not only survived, we had evolved. The journey had changed us, opened our eyes to the truth of our place within this world. As we stepped out into the crisp air, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lift, but a lingering question remained. Had we truly learned our lesson, or were we destined to repeat our mistakes? "I survived," I whispered to myself as we walked away, the echoes of the guardian's words still resonating in my mind. But sometimes I wonder if I truly left that place. As we made our way back down the mountain, the landscape felt transformed. The shadows of the past lingered, but they no longer held power over us. Each step felt lighter, filled with purpose and clarity. We had faced the storm, and in doing so, we had come to understand the delicate balance of our existence within this world. The journey had cost us dearly. Harold's absence echoed in our hearts, a constant reminder of the dangers we had faced. Yet we carried his memory with us, not as a burden, but as a guiding light, a reminder of the importance of respect for the land and the responsibility that came with discovery. As we reached the base of the mountain, the sun broke through the wild clouds, casting a warm glow over the snow. It was a new beginning, a chance to start anew. I glanced at Sarah, her expression a mix of resolve and hope. We had survived, but more importantly, we had grown. The lessons we had learned would stay with us, shaping our future endeavors. We had witnessed the beauty and fury of the land, and we understood that our actions had consequences. Together, we would become guardians of its secrets, protectors of its history. In the days that followed, we shared our story with others, spreading awareness of the delicate balance we must maintain with nature. Our journey became a testament to the power of humility and understanding, inspiring others to respect the world around them. But the echoes of the guardian's words remained. The balance must be maintained. I realized that our journey was far from over. It was just the beginning of a lifelong commitment to learning and growth. As we stepped into the future, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We would honor the land, the memory of Harold, and the lessons we had learned. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, but we would face them together, armed with the knowledge that true strength lies not in conquering, but in understanding. Months later, as I stood on the shores of Baffin Island, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The landscape had changed, but so had I. The memories of that fateful journey lingered, shaping my perspective on the world. I often returned to the mountain, not just to remember, but to listen, to the whispers of the land, the stories it had to tell. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I wondered if the guardian still watched over us, waiting for the moment we might forget the lessons learned. Would we be ready when the storm returned? Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through Baffin Island. I invite you to reflect on the themes of courage, respect, and the delicate balance we share with nature. Share your thoughts and insights. How can we all strive to honor the world around us? If you enjoyed this story, click to see the next adventure that awaits. Explore new worlds, face fresh challenges, and discover the power of storytelling. You won't want to miss What comes next?